Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven, and I'm here with my very special guest, Cheryl Costa. And Cheryl, you with me?
Yep.
All right. And so I'll let you kind of finish up there on that Roswell. We have people are starting to ask questions in chat, so I have a bunch of questions here lined up for you. But I did want to finish up a little bit on the Roswell insofar as what we were touching base on. So it does sound like there was something really going down over there.
Well, yeah. To my mind, there was, and I ran this by a couple of other experts. Stanton Friedman, to be one. I've known him on and off over the last 20 years, and I dropped him an email and said, "Hey, Stanton, I found this trail of sightings, And he said, "Yeah, you need to read this report by so and so." So I went out and looked it up, and I found a PDF of the original document from '68, and the data correlated with mine. I'm going, okay, I'm just doing duplication of what this other guy did, but it was amazing to see that. So, so do I believe Roswell occurred? There's plenty of evidence to suggest something was going on. I don't know what really went down. I wasn't born yet, but looking back at the data, something huge was going down.
Right. It almost sounds like there were multiple craft, though, insofar as like, okay, so obviously they touched on the one craft, but it almost sounds like the skies were saturated with craft. Am I missing something? Is that kind of right or no?
Well, that is correct.
Okay.
And one of the things that, like, the New York Times editor was making fun of, they were making fun of people who are saying, "Oh, now they're coming in all kinds of shapes and sizes and colors." Well, 65 years later, we do know they come in about 90 configurations, and they do come in different colors.
Right.
So it was still a rather new phenomena for people then. There were in the Roswell situation. There were two crashes. There was the one at the Brazil farm, and then there was another one further away in a place called Corona, and that's where they actually got the bodies and supposedly one live being. But I'm not an expert on Roswell, so I won't belabor that point.
Right. No, I think it's awesome. I love your grounded approach to this information, by the way. I really like the way you explain things. Really appreciate that. You have a nice personality. Let's put it that way.
Well, one of the things that's been popular about the way I write my column is that they keep, by the way, on SyracuseNewTimes.com. If your listeners go to SyracuseNewTimes.com and they go across the control bar and you'll see blogs, and you hover your mouse over blogs, you'll see a drop down, and about the second or third one down it says New York Skies, the UFO column. If you click on that, you'll find the current article at the top and probably my last 8 to 10 articles.
Excellent. Yeah, I checked that out, and I recommend it. It's in the chat, by the way, so all of our people in chat have access to that as well. And let's go ahead and read a few questions here real quick. I have someone asking you now. It sounds like, does she believe that most of UFOs are really shadow government? I don't think you really mentioned anything about that.
No, I do not believe most UFOs are shadow government operations. Mm-hmm. Some small percentage probably are. But I've looked at too much evidence before the government would have been involved with that. Like I said, I report stories from early 60s all the way back to the 1790s, and there's been plenty of stuff out there. Watch Ancient Aliens sometime. They're very accurate with a lot of information that they convey. Not everything they talk about is what I'm going to say good, but all the stuff from ancient sightings is relatively accurate.
Mm-hmm, exactly, and that's a great answer. And Wolfman J, it looks like, says, ask Cheryl if she knows anything about Kecksburg, Pennsylvania.
Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Okay, an acorn-shaped object came down in 1965. The local radio reporter, I know what most people know. The local radio reporter tried to get do a story about it, and the military kind of shut them down and everything. And then everybody blew it off and said, "Oh, it's no big thing." Researchers since that time have confirmed that very high level, the president and other very high level people had a very serious meeting about Kecksburg the next day. That's been found in documents from like the National Archives, things like that. I'm not an expert on Kecksburg much beyond that.
Okay, well, great answer nonetheless. And I have one of my own personal. I know this doesn't really relate to New York or anything, but I'm curious about what your impression is of the Foo Fighters from World War II.
Foo Fighters, okay. Well, again, we were having this major global conflict. I am of the belief, as a number of people in this field are, that they have been watching us and observing us for a long time. Think of them like intergalactic anthropologists, okay? They're studying our culture, okay? And I suspect that they track some of our craft. I've got a lot of pictures of Foo Fighters in one of my presentations, and that were military pictures of these things. And they followed bombers, they followed fighters. Sometimes we shot at them, sometimes they shot back. I heard some very horrendous stories about the Foo Fighters. Again, neither side really understood them until after the war. And then they realized everybody was dealing with them, even the enemy.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, you said they shot back. Did they ever destroy a regular craft like one of ours?
I've heard a story where they shot down one bomber, but I can't confirm that. Someone told me that at a UFO convention, another expert that was there. But he's never sent me any kind of an article or paper that tells me what that was about.
Right. Wow, there's so many missing pieces on so many levels, but it's fascinating nonetheless to try to piece this all together. Yeah, I really appreciate you being on the show tonight, I said.
When I did my presentation in Arizona, I did something the other presenters didn't do. One, I'm a little bit more of an animated presenter, okay? A lot of people just stood behind the podium like wooden Indians. I dance around a lot on the stage. The other thing that I did in my presentation is I had a lot of charts and graphs because I've been crunching numbers about New York State sightings now for almost 2 years, and I've got some incredible numbers and some incredible charts, and I had all kinds of charts and graphs, and I was probably the first person to come up there in years that had charts and graphs and all this kind of stuff showing you the amount of sightings we have, the types of sightings we have, and things like this. And this is something anybody can do if they want to do the research. You can go out there. It takes some midnight oil. You have to open up the National UFO Reporting Center database, pick out your state. And sometimes you have to sit here with a pen and paper and a calculator and actually count the sightings or something like this. MUFON, you can get onto their database and actually, they've got a web interface. You can actually crunch the data. You can select your state and a date window and push the button, and it'll tell you how many sightings they had and things like this. Anybody can do this. And like I said, think globally. If you want disclosure, think globally, act locally. Go analyze the stuff for your own state. And don't just worry about the latest and greatest sighting. Go back and look at stuff that's happened in the past in your state. You will find some amazing things in these databases.
Exactly, and it makes me wonder, since there's so much activity, that certainly they must have a route of some kind where they would actually come back at a certain point on the timeline, I would think anyway. What's your impression of that?
The
craft, like the UFOs, or whatever they are. I mean, literally, wouldn't you think they would come back like a highway? Like I say, it's like a universal highway. Oh, okay. So we see them, and there's a flux of them coming in, and wouldn't you think they would come back?
I've heard that theory. I can't talk to it.
Okay.
I am working with one professor from a college out in California, a university out in California. He's an astronomer, and he's doing some what they call Archeo-astronomy study of a particular site, actually 4 counties in the Hudson Valley. And he asked me if I would share my data with him, and we have an email correspondence going on since the convention. Basically, he's studying some artifacts, some cave artifacts. A lot of pagans know about these places that, there are some places around that on the solstice or on the winter solstice or the summer solstice, the sun rises and it lights up a chamber or something like that, or puts a pattern up on a rock wall, that kind of thing. And they found some stuff down in the Hudson Valley they think has Archeo-astronomy kind of alignments, but they're not sure. And one of the things he wants to add to his paper was, do those particular counties have lots of UFO sightings? And I told him I would share my data with him. And I'm working on a new report right now that's going to probably be about the best that anybody's done on New York State. I hope to have it done in another month or so.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, that's going to be very interesting to read, without a doubt, on there. And so for yourself, do you consider yourself something of a contactee?
No, not really.
Nope. Okay.
No, I've had four or five good sightings over my life, but I don't consider myself a contactee.
That's pretty good for sightings in general. Yeah.
Well, I feel very fortunate to have seen those, but like I said, I don't consider myself a contactee.
Okay, good. Let's see here. So you were in the military, and you have a really extensive background in the military. Now, what's your impression of military abductions? And I don't know if you can really talk about it or if you have any information on it, or the MyLabs. Do you have any, have you done much research in that area at all?
No, none.
Okay, I was just curious. Did you ever notice when you were in the military that some people might have been contactees, or did you see anything pertaining to UFOs when you were in the military that you can talk about?
No.
Okay. Yeah,
no, I had one sighting while I was in the service. It was Christmas Eve, 1971. I was in Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam, and I was walking over to go to midnight mass with some friends, and I happened to look up in the sky in a particular constellation, and I saw this thing moving across the sky at a rather great speed, and I thought, well, it must be a fighter jet or something, and then it stopped, and it hovered. And then it danced around in the general position it was in, and then it shot off at warp speed. And I was an 18-year-old kid, and I went to midnight mass, and my head was not on the mass, that's for sure. You know. But did I tell anybody about it in those days? No, it's like everybody else. You know, if you told somebody about it, everybody'd say you're crazy.
Right.
And that's the last thing I needed. Considering where I was.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, for sure. Well, I applaud you for being in the military, and of course, I'm glad you made it back okay. That's a good thing. Yeah, and I take it you didn't have any trauma from being in the military.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
Who told you that?
No, I was just trying to be positive, really.
No. I was a basket case for a long time when I came back, and every now and then the PTSD catches up with you a little bit, but I've made peace. The hardest part was I had to make peace with it. That's about all I can say. You know,
Right.
Talk to any veteran. A lot of people clam up about it, and I didn't even start talking about it until a few years ago. You know, and it was nothing that I'm really proud of. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. And you know, I understand there's also cellular trauma to some degree, which I suspect connects to the PTSD. Now, for a lot of people, and I know a lot of people who are traumatized from one thing or another and suffer from certain things. So how did you break through to heal yourself and kind of start to move that energy away? And I know you have a very extensive spiritual background, and we can get into that a little bit as well.
Well, I guess I left the Catholic Church when I was 17. I was in the service in a couple of months after my 18th birthday. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't go to church with anybody, although when I was stationed in Texas, I used to, this is important to know, I did go, different people in the barracks would say, well, you know, why don't you come to church with me? And I went to more tent revivals and river baptisms than you can shake a stick at, okay? Mm-hmm. And I went to church with everybody just to see if anybody had the market cornered on it. And I think about the only people I resonated with when I was in Vietnam was I had a couple of Native American friends, and we resonated a little bit. Their joke with me is that they know I have a kind of a second sight kind of thing, and they basically told me Coyote has given me a kind of they could tell that I had this, and that was as much as I really got involved with it over there. It was probably during my exploration of my Wicca studies in the late 70s, middle 80s that I finally made peace of it. I think over a series of a couple of sweat lodges, I made some peace with it. My last peace that I made with it, I made when I was living in a Buddhist monastery back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. A lot of people have a hard time breaking through that, so I was curious, if you can provide information to people. Do you actually do healing sessions at all, or do you ever do counseling?
I do I've done counseling on and off, but a person has to ask you.
Right.
They have to ask you for the help, and some people don't, and I don't try and force it on them. If somebody asks my opinion, I've been known to try and help them. But some people really, truly want to get past it. Some people, they need their trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say it that way, but there's some people who seem to be, like being a victim,
mm-hmm.
or they
Right.
need being a victim. So I mean, again, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And you can guide somebody towards healing, an internal self-healing, but if they won't do the work, I know people who did therapy. Okay, I did therapy for a number of years, and I worked very hard at it. Some people just thought it was a waste of money. They just went there to talk. They did not work hard at it.
Mm-hmm.
And therapy, if you really do it right, it's not just going there and talking because you go home and do some introspection and things like this, and you make notes and you come back and talk to the therapist about those notes you did. Okay, but I know a lot of people just thought it was a waste of time. Well, they weren't willing to invest themselves in it. And
Mm-hmm.
the people I know who have made good effort in therapy or in spiritual counseling have invested themselves in doing it.
Mm-hmm.
They think they have to go there. Again, too many people come to people who are in the craft and say, "Oh, you're a witch. Why don't you they want me to put my hand on their head and cure them?"
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work that way. The magic happens, but they have to create it in themselves to make
Right.
the real healing happen.
Truly, I agree. Well, it's about self-empowerment, if you ask me, and also, like you were saying, dedication and, just being diligent to some degree. Now, it's interesting. Now, you made the transition from the Catholic Church into the craft, which is like, that's pretty, that's pretty intense. Now, what was your impression of the Catholic Church in general?
I had every intention as a grade school kid of entering a holy order.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was I got into high school, and remember this is in the 60s. We had people getting up and leaving church because, especially if the priest started ranting about birth control or something like this, and it was a pretty volatile time. And there were times I went to Catholic school. And there were times that sometimes me and the priest would have knockdown, drag-out argument talks about it, and it was all supposed to be, quote, academic debate,
Mm-hmm.
in class. But there was a consensus that, you've got the wrong view, and all I was doing was asking hard questions, and I wasn't satisfied with an answer. Oh, that's a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't satisfied with an answer because we said so. Or you need to be more obedient and just believe. I wasn't satisfied with that.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in later, 3 decades later, as I came into Buddhism, and I consider myself Wiccan Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Buddhism is less a religion and more of a technology. Okay, it can be a religion for somebody, but it's more of a technology, and I find that it complements nicely my shamanic Wicca practice. It complements it nicely. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the points that I bring up to people is I had a number of Wiccan friends when I found Buddhism, and I wasn't really looking for it. It sort of found me. It's a long story. But what happened was the thing to keep in mind is I had a lot of Wiccans come to me. Oh, you turned your back on the goddess. I never turned my back on the goddess, because after I got done with a 2-year walkabout and found myself in a Buddhist monastery, a Buddhist temple, I found myself at the feet of a 6-foot tall painting of green Tara.
Nice.
In the Buddhist thing. So I found a bridge. There was a bridge there. This is Tibetan Orthodox tradition, so that's why we had this bind, and it got deeper than that. But my opinion of the Catholic Church, I don't want to insult anybody, but my frank, honest opinion. Again, remember I said I have second sight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm aware of a larger world around us, and as a kid, I was aware of a larger world around us, and I was very aware of. I'll give you a good example. Kid in our school's father died, and the nuns all told us, "Oh yeah, Stevie's father, he's in heaven with God." And of course, I look over there on the other side of the room, and there's when Stevie hits come back to school, and his father's standing behind him. Okay, and I saw this sort of thing for years, okay, and my argument was they aren't really teaching what really happens.
I agree.
The only faith that I found that addresses and says how you die is as important as how you live is Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Wiccans don't get it right.
I agree.
We're close, but we don't get it right. And that's where any students I have now, I teach them a blend of Wiccan theory with Buddhist theory, and I show them where that blending point is, because frankly, I'm of the belief, and there's a number of other scholars that think this as well, that if Buddhism always makes itself indigenous wherever it goes, okay? Eventually, okay? Well, right now, the Buddhism we have in North America is predominantly imported. We've got all the Asian baggage in our Buddhism, okay? All the bowing and incenses and all the other things, and there's tons of books about it and everything. They're an inch thick. The stuff the Buddha taught us is a book probably as thick as your little finger. Okay, the real Buddhism, the real what we're going to call non-sectarian Buddhism. And if you go back into all of it, it turns out to be a lot of Asian baggage. And during my period as a monastic, I took vows as a Buddhist nun. I still hold those vows. I also, you tortured the name of the yogi thing. I'm
sorry.
No. Most people can't pronounce it. I am a Nakmo.
Thank you.
Pa is a man, and a Nakmo is a woman. Nakmo is a woman, and I am. That is technically it is the. The loose Western definition is, they are lay monastics. They are not really. They are and they aren't. Think of the Nakmo. Only the Orthodox Tibetan tradition has it. There are 4 great traditions in Tibet, and the Orthodox tradition was the ones that had the shamans in them before Buddhism was brought to Tibet 1,000 years ago by Padmasambhava. Before that, they had their shamans, and he educated the shamans on Buddhism, and they resonated with what I resonated, Wicca and Buddhism, and they resonated, and the Orthodox tradition has a shamanic path that is Buddhist, and they also have a classic Buddhist monastic path. Now, the shamanic path has what they call a tantric tone to it. And now I've said tantra, and everybody in the audience says, that's sex magic. No, it's not. And the people that about every Wiccan convention that I've gone to, some fools up there talking about Tantra, and it's always about sex magic, and they are, while they are right to some degree, they are as wrong as they are right. Mm-hmm. They are about 50-50. They are not teaching what Tantra is truly about.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I don't want to beat that up too much. But so what were we talking about?
Well, no, I actually think that's a good point to make, because I see that also. I see people using the word Tantra very loosely and of course, associating it with things that are kind of, really not in alignment with that. One thing I wanted to just comment on really quickly, I'm eclectic craft too, and I see the craft, and I appreciate and love Buddhism very much, and I'm also a martial artist, and I kind of mix everything together on a higher level of consciousness. Have you noticed through the craft itself that their teachings, and what I've noticed is that there are a lot of watered down, there's a lot of watered down ritual to some degree, or have you noticed that at all?
I was swallowing a pill. Go
That's
ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, watered down ritual. All right. Let's take this. Let's chew on this a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Used to be in craft, you had like Gardnerian, Alexandrian tradition. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then we started having a certain amount of eclecticism, and I'm good with the idea of eclecticism. The problem that I see with eclecticism, where it's things kind of gotten diluted, is everybody started doing, quote, their own thing. Mm-hmm. And what happened is you've got a lot of people doing their own thing, and I consider myself eclectic. I use a little bit of Wicca, and I use a little bit of Norse, and I use a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. And then they wonder why things don't work. And so it's like this. If I sit down at your computer and I try to use the symbols from the word processor that I have versus the word processor that you have, it's not going to work very good, is it?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And this is what I try to get across to people, is symbolism. Let's go down into basic magic for a minute. We have the younger self, we have the talking self, we have the higher self, okay? First thing you got to remember is they are not separate from each other. People think of them as separate, and they're out there someplace. No, they're not out there. They are inside of you. Point. That higher self, you are the Holy Trinity. Mm-hmm. This is how I teach it. You are the Holy Trinity. You are God incarnate. That's the talking self. And your connection to the higher self is through that younger self, or the Holy Spirit, as Christians would refer to it, right? That is your communication mechanism. And if you go back in and look in Christian scripture, they always talk about the Holy Spirit being the communicant mm-hmm. to higher things. Okay, so we have to get ourselves in a meditative state, or we use drumming or whatever to get ourselves into the zone, to the magical zone, so we can work magic. Well, okay, let's take a gentle aspect to this. Two issues. There's active magic, and then there's what we call divining. I know a lot of people who will not do anything. They want to go right out there and start working active magic. And you can't get them sit down and study divining, whether you're doing it with bones, or you're doing it with runes, or you're doing it with tarot cards. Okay? And I am of the school that says you need, if you're going to be talking to your younger self, which is symbolic communication, you can't talk to it with words. I mean, I don't know how many people I said your diluted ritual that get out there and they have these long liturgical readings. They write these big scripts in their oratory. How many priestesses have you seen get out there and get out the script and start just running, talking words and all this big flowery language? Mm-hmm. The younger self doesn't get it because it's a non-verbal communication. And a lot of people have diluted down their rituals. In fact, I've had a lot of arguments with people at major festivals. Where is the symbolism? Where is the theater? You can't, you go to big events like a big festival or something like this. Oh, they got bands, but try and get those festivals to do sacred theater, and they'll laugh you out of the room. Theater came from the temples, if we go back to our Greek roots. And so diluted ritual. Yeah, the rituals are diluted. The symbolism has been lost for a lot of these people. Maybe they never had it to begin with. And I'll show you one symptom of it. How many people do you know that have, you talk to them and they say, oh, I got a new tarot card deck, and you talk to them more and you find out, oh, they got 30 different tarot card decks, and they use a different one every day. I'm sorry, that is not how you develop a relationship with your younger self. You have to have stable symbology so you know your younger self knows what you're talking about, when you see a particular symbol, and you know what the younger self is talking about when you have this intuitive flash of a particular symbology. And that is the most important thing. The Army remote viewers figured this out too. Okay, that symbology is everything, and training your younger self is the key to all of it. So it starts with divining, and it evolves to active magic. Once you've established this good, symbolic, nonverbal relationship with your younger self, then you move into active magic. And this is how I've changed probably over the last 15 or 20 years. I've changed over to trying to teach this. And the biggest resistance I get from everybody is that they don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear this. They want to dress up in black robes and hoods and go dance around the fire, and because that's what everybody else is doing.
Right. Yeah.
And as a teacher, I'm frustrated by it.
Oh, I love to hear you talk tonight, let me tell you, because, that's how I'm feeling. So this is wonderful. Go ahead.
It's a big issue with me. It really is. A lot of people get what I'm going to call, in the Christian community, we have a joke about, we had the joke about there's Christmas and Easter Catholics, right? Well, we have the same thing. We have Beltane and Yule pagans, right? And the only time you see them are for the big holidays, and that's about it.
Right.
And it drives me crazy. The other thing that drives me crazy are, and I'm not trying to come down on anybody who's just getting into the faith, but I'm sorry. I've been at this. I'm 63 years old. I've been at this since 1978, and every 22-year-old priestess has read 2 books, thinks they know more than I do about this. And it's very frustrating, especially when I try to explain to them that they need to make ritual mean something. They need to make it have a profound experience.
So true.
That's the theatrical director in me,
No, but you're so right on that, on so many different levels. And my question to you is do you teach virtual classes online?
I've tried. I have tried. I have this one Facebook page I participate in, and I have written probably a dozen essays to go in on Facebook. A couple hundred words. That's about all. After that, people won't read it. And I'll get maybe this list has 1,000 people in it, and they all claim to be Wiccan shaman, and there'll be a dozen likes. 100 people will have read it. I'll be lucky to get a dozen likes, and I say discussion and commentary welcome, and I'm lucky to get 1 or 2 comments. Okay? Now, either they think I'm an idiot, or they're scared to comment because they feel like they're going to be an idiot, that they think they're idiots. I don't know what to think. In fact, the moderator on the page, I was getting ready to leave the page altogether, the group, and he begged me not to leave. He says, no, there's somebody else besides myself doing all the teaching here. I says, why are we not getting any interaction here? We got one of the most powerful tools here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people who are doing a very good job of this, of doing virtual teaching, is the seminary there, the I don't remember the proper name for it. It's the people out of the Aquarian Tabernacle pagan group there, the Wolstein seminary.
Mm-hmm.
It's an online. They do a lot of their training through Second Life,
mm-hmm.
and they do a very good job of the virtual training. But there's limits. There's limits. You can convey information. You can have good discussion. It's difficult to do, to have really good substance, the feel of being with other people in ritual. Virtual ritual doesn't cut it for me, frankly.
No, I agree. No, I was just thinking insofar as just kind of education, though, just basic class, that would be very informative. Now, for somebody who's into the craft, now, what do you think, if at all, if there are any books out there that are actually worth reading for the craft and teaching the language of the craft? Now, I would suspect that we're talking about the impression of, or we want to talk about the pure craft versus everybody's version of what they think it's supposed to be. So is there anybody that comes to mind?
I'll probably insult your guests, your listeners.
No.
I've had arguments with a number of people. I've had a number of arguments with people over the years about this, and the booksellers hate me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I used to hand out to my class. I would give them their first books. And I would tell them, do not go out and buy other books and contradict what I'm talking about in class. After a year and a day, if you want to go out and buy other books, fine. While you're in my class, we will work with these two books. Okay? Okay, for the first year and a day. And after that, I'm open to other ideas. The two books I used to give out is I gave out Spiral Dance by Starhawk.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one I gave out was the Blue... witchcraft book by Ray Buckland.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I used Starhawk for the philosophy of discovering the ancient goddess.
Mm-hmm.
And and again, that book, she even admits it. If you read this book carefully on your second or third pass, you can pretty much get a handle on maybe even how to start a coven or whatever. Okay, remember, this book came out on Halloween 1979. In those days, it was very difficult to find other people.
Mm-hmm.
It was extremely difficult. Then I used the Buckland book for what I'm going to call the witchcraft trappings aspect. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here he'll give you a diagram for how to make a rope. Whatever. He'll tell you about. He'll tell you all the witchy stuff. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I use as a basic teaching tool. And of course, then I would do talk. That was what I gave them to read, and then I gave them lecture. Now, the last few classes that I've taught, of the few that I've taught in the last 10 years, is I have sat down and tried to teach them a more advanced form of what I'm going to call metaphysics. Mm-hmm. The idea basically is saying, let me show you what all of this symbology stuff is about. Why do you need this symbology? Because people right off the bat, they get online and they start talking to people and they're saying, well, I was talking to my friend online. Why aren't we doing a little bit more Norse stuff in here? And why can't we do this? And can't we have some Egyptian symbolism in here? And again, I just told you and your listeners, symbology is everything. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I do is I teach them two things. For grounding and centering, my first class anymore, and I've been doing this since 1994, this one thing. On the first class, I'll get up there and I'll get another priestess to help me, and we'll do a nice long class, and we'll teach a little bit about the community, what it's like to be in a community, what it's like to be in a coven, if you want, what it's like to be a solitaire, what it's like to go to a festival, what to expect, what not to expect. And then at the end of the evening, I will teach them their first spell. And the first spell is I teach them how to make white bread. 5% of the group will get up at the end and come up to me and say, "That's not magic," and storm out. Okay? And all I taught them how to do was basic white bread. Okay? And a very simple formula for it. Because my mentality is, you can't make the bread, you'll never do the magic. And again, I have people push back at me on this. What the whole exercise is about is, if you can't follow my instructions and go buy the flour I tell you to buy, the yeast I tell you to buy, and follow the directions to put it all together for the amount of time it has to rise and knead and the temperature in the oven, if you can't follow these instructions, how do you expect to make the magic work when there's very specific instructions? People criticize magic if it's not, what's the word? You can't, this isn't repeatable science. Okay, so I give them a metaphor. The bread is a metaphor for our magical art. And if you, the next second class, they'll come to me and they say, "Oh, my bread didn't do something." Well, what did you do differently? Well, I didn't use white sugar. I used brown sugar. Changed the formula. Okay. Oh, I threw some raisins in there. It changed the formula. Oh, the water wasn't warm enough when I put the yeast in. It wouldn't work, so I microwaved it. Killed the yeast. Okay, I rushed home instead of doing it, taking 2 hours to do it the night before class. They rush home from work on the day of class, slam it together, throw it into a moderately lukewarm, tepid oven, and then wonder why it didn't rise, or wonder why it came up and it had the consistency of a hockey puck, or exploded all over their oven, or something. And I would point out these things. I had 10% of the class. Remember, I lost 5% the first week because they said that's not magic. 10% of the class won't come back because they're too embarrassed to show you their mistakes. The ones that show up, I simply, very gently, very kindly explain what they did wrong, find out what they did differently, and just said, follow the formula. And once we got everybody to the point where they could make a decent loaf of bread, we had already weeded out all the people who thought it was baloney.
Right.
Okay? But what the class found out was I was teaching them a form of meditation with the kneading of the bread and exactness. Okay, and I showed them that you have to make time for your magical space. So I told them, give yourself 2 hours the night before. Don't plan to watch TV while it's rising. Read, listen to some tribal music, something. Stay in the magical zone while you're working on this bread. Okay, because your magic. In fact, these days I tell people, and there's an old line from one of the Star Wars movies, how you learn such practices? Well, not with the Jedi. Well, not with a cell phone in your hand. If you're going to do magical stuff, you got to put the phone on charge and turn it off, put it in airplane mode, and go work your magic. You can't be sitting there pulling it out while you're in the middle of ritual.
Right. Totally.
You wouldn't believe how many people I've had to deal that issue with.
Oh, no. Oh, that's terrible. Yeah.
But I mean, hey, I'm a dinosaur. Nobody listens to me, So.
Well, there's something to be said about dinosaurs. Let me tell you, I appreciate dinosaurs. When you think about fear in general and symbology. I know that there's a lot of mainstream that's very intimidated by symbolism, especially when it comes to the craft. I mean, from pentacles, pentagrams to whatever symbolism. Have you noticed that? Have you picked up on that? I'm sure you have, obviously.
Yeah. Again, they don't understand us. We don't. Our symbolism doesn't necessarily. Pentagrams, people get all twitched about that. I don't worry about that. Sometimes our people just push it too hard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and want to be in everybody's face. And truly, I come from a flavor of the craft. It takes the same flavor that martial artists say: try not to offend.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The thing with symbolism for me is I use the bread as a symbol. All the components in making the bread in follow-on classes, I said, this is symbolic of our water. This is symbolic of our fire. This is symbolic of our earth. Okay? Mm-hmm. And what people figured out later was that through the bread, you could use the bread as a repeatable living metaphor to actually execute the magic.
Mm-hmm.
And it works very well. And I had a bunch of students up to my apartment once and that really, truly wanted to really pursue this. And it was a very small slice of a much larger class. And I got them up there one Saturday morning, and I said, what we're going to do is something very different. We're going to take our dry goods, all the flour and the sugar and all the stuff that you mix up in the dry goods, put them in a big plastic bowl. I put on some belly dance music, and we went into the other room there, and we sat there. We all had our bowls under our arm, and we were belly dancing along with stirring the dry goods. Okay.
Nice.
The loaves of bread were just boiling out of the they were just fluffing out of the bread pans. And the students were like blown away. So why? I said, you would love into it. You include love and joy into this bread making. This is magic. This is how magic works. And those are some of the best priestesses I ever ordained.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. Yeah, love is a powerful vibration, without a doubt there. And to me, it seems like the craft should be treated like martial arts. I mean, it's a lifestyle. And, of course, it's all about, in the end, consciousness, in my opinion, and really how you navigate with energy.
I tell people it's an art, a science, and a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there is the art part of it. I have people argue about the science with me all the time, especially the people who say, oh, it's not repeatable. It's not repeatable for the people who don't know what they're doing. Any fool wants to pick up a book and say, hey, I want to mix these things together and it's supposed to cause a spell. They don't get it. They don't understand it. The thing in the spell, or better yet, people come to me, particularly people early in the craft, go, oh, I found this old book on craft. I got this spell. You don't need that spell book. In fact, I recommend you don't use it because, one, you don't know what that symbology is.
Mm-hmm.
You're not from 1890. You don't know what that means.
Yep.
And this symbology thing is important. You have to establish your own symbology, or if your tradition is teaching a symbology, go with that of the tradition. If you're eclectic, then establish your own symbology in the course of what you're teaching your students. And that's the thing that we're missing a lot of. The other part with the watered down rituals is there's almost nobody, everybody's all words. Nobody does silent play acting theater anymore for symbology.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody will do it. You can't get them to do it. They think it's dorky. It's not. It's where our roots come from.
I so agree with you. Yeah. That is such a good thing that you're noticing. Yeah, I pick up on that also with a lot of different covens as well. So, yeah, it seems like everything is just kind of fast forward, and maybe it's the attention span. I'm not sure. Maybe it's today's society where everything is busy, and everything is like you're saying, texting and cell phones, and people don't know how to really center themselves and really go into that space. It seems to me like people don't know how to reset their spiritual battery sometimes.
I would not disagree. You know, the biggest argument I make with prospective students, I tell them, if I get the opportunity to teach, okay, I don't get that many opportunities to teach because, like I said, I'm a dinosaur, and what the heck do I know? You know, one of the big arguments I have with people, especially with the cell phones, they think I'm being a hard ass about it, okay, and I tell them, you know, are you afraid to be alone with your thoughts? Why do you have to constantly have that cell phone in your ear? Why do you have to constantly, you go to a movie, instead of sitting there and enjoy the lovely music at the end of the movie and watch the credits, maybe there's an extra little feature at the end of the credits or something like this, why do you suddenly have this thing up in front of your face? Are you that addicted? Oh, I don't have an addiction. Then put the cell phone down for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me you don't have an addiction.
Yep. Exactly.
You know, and that is my teaching to these kids, and I try to explain to them, you got to be willing to be alone with your thoughts. I had the same problem with the Buddhist kids. You know, you want to start meditating, they're sitting there in a lotus position, and they got their cell phone, you know, tucked under one knee, and you know, it beeps, and they kind of open their eye and look down at it real quick. You know, no, you can't be distracted.
No way. Oh my gosh, I can't believe they do that. I mean, that's so wrong. You have to leave the cell phones at the door. You should have a little basket and make them dump them all at the door.
So for me, the bottom line is I think we need to see more. I have a couple of friends of mine that have tried to use a couple of sacred plays that I wrote and tried to get them done at some festivals. And the festivals, if they did allow them to be, they always gave them the worst time as far as what time of day it was done. Oh, you guys can do it during the supper hour. Nobody shows up. Or they say, oh, well, do it kind of a little family time after the supper hour, before the bands get going up in the barn, you know, and they won't set up for you. They won't put chairs out for you. And we did do this at one festival down in the Mid-Atlantic, a Free Spirit Gathering. We took a couple of my plays. I had one called Gadzooks and Ophelia. It had a very Norse feel to it, okay? It's a scream. It's funny, but it's got a lesson. And I got a bunch of the teenagers who wanted to do the play. I rehearsed them privately for a couple of days, and I told them, if you want an audience, you got to go out there and go bug all the people to come. So we had a nice little showing, you know, in the amphitheater at this campground we had, and it was very well received. You saw parents up there with the kids explaining what was going on, you know, and why it was important. And I got a lot of parents came back to me and said that was very helpful for me to explain why this God was doing this and why this girl was having so much trouble with what she was doing, you know. Mm-hmm. But try to get the festival coordinators to embrace this thing. We had another girl come up from New York City a couple of years ago. I know we're running out of time here. Mm-hmm. We had a girl come up from New York City a few years ago, wanted to do theater symbology. She was at the same festival, so her and I resonated very nicely. And we had 1,000 people at this thing, and we couldn't get more than 20 people involved with this theatrical seminar that we were doing for doing theatrical ritual. Couldn't get more than 20 people involved.
Wow.
And that is and people say, oh, we want advanced training, you know. No, they want a party, and they want something else, you know. Mm-hmm. I don't do festivals anymore. I get invited. I have 4 people show up to my classes, and I'll go there with a rank of classes. I had some guys from the Blue Star Coven in the New York City area. They were a very prominent coven down there. And I did this series of teachings called 21st Century Magic is how they were. 21st Century Magic, remote viewing. 21st Century Magic, active magic. Mm-hmm. 21st Century Magic, symbology, and why it's important. This was a series of classes that I did. And I was lucky, again, there was like 700-800 people at this convention. I had all I could do to get 8 or 10 people there.
Oh,
to my
wow.
classes. Okay. And one of the things that happened was at the end there was this two priests, young priests that had been there from the Blue Star Coven, and they're an old Gardnerian group. Mm-hmm. And this one guy, the last class I taught, he had tears in his eyes. About halfway through the end of class, he said, "We've got 800 people at this convention, and you are giving out water in the desert here with what you've been teaching for 3 days." Hmm. He said, "Why aren't they in here?" Mm-hmm. And right. So I put it back at the feet of the pagan community in general. Are they into this, or are they just here for the party?
I kind of agree with you on that one. And we're running out of time, Cheryl. I have to tell you, it's been a pleasure to have you on tonight, and I want to thank you very much for joining us. It's been wonderful, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Anytime.
Yeah. And please let everybody know how to get in touch with you if they have a story or UFO they want to share with you or anything like that. What's the best way to contact you?
If they want to write to me, they can write to author, AUTHOR, at CherylCosta.com. Cheryl with a C, CHERYLCOSTA.com.
Excellent.
Author at CherylCosta.com.
Awesome. And everybody, thank you for tuning in tonight. And thanks for the questions in chat. And stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dungeon and Mecky coming up next, of course, to sell you on us tonight from Down Under. We probably have about a minute or so left here, Cheryl. Is there anything you wanted to add? Anything you want to leave the listeners with tonight?
Oh, I think the most important, I think I hammered it to death. The symbology is everything. Mm-hmm. Get back to the roots of symbology.
Excellent. Very good. Well, have a wonderful evening, and thank you again, Cheryl. Everybody take care. I'll see you next week.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Listening to Revolution